The bells of St. Margaret's Abbey rang through the morning mist as I knelt upon the cold stone floor of my cell. 20 summers had passed since my birth, yet only 3 since I had taken my vows as a novice in this sacred place. The weight of my woolen habit pressed against my shoulders, like the very burden of my faith itself. My name is Sister Evangeline, though once I was simply Eva, daughter of a merchant in the nearby village of Thornwick. When the fever took my parents during that terrible winter, my uncle brought me here, claiming it was God's will that I serve in his house. Perhaps it was. Perhaps it was merely convenient for a man with 7 children of his own and little coin to spare. The scriptorium was my sanctuary within this sanctuary. Among the illuminated manuscripts and precious volumes, I found solace that even the chapel could not provide. Brother Thomas, the abbey scribe, had taken notice of my careful hand and keen eye for detail. Under his tutelage, I had learned to copy texts with precision that rivaled even the most experienced monks from the nearby monastery of St. Benedict. It was there, bent over parchment stained with golden ink, that I first heard his voice. "Sister, thy work doth surpass even that of our most skilled brothers." I raised my eyes to see a figure silhouetted against the arched window. The morning sun cast him in ethereal light, and for a moment I thought perhaps an angel had descended to speak with me. But as he stepped forward, I saw he was mortal, a young man, of perhaps 25 years, wearing the simple brown robes of the Benedictine order. "Forgive me, brother," I whispered, lowering my gaze as was proper. "I know not who doth address me." "I am Brother Marcus," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to banish the perpetual chill of the stone wall. "I have come from the monastery to retrieve copies of St. Augustine's writings for our library." Brother Thomas emerged from behind a towering shelf of manuscripts, his aged face creased with a welcoming smile. "Ah, Marcus, my boy, how fares thy journey, and how is thy good Abbot Benedict? He sends his blessing." Brother Thomas, along with these tokens of our monastery's gratitude, Marcus presented a small wooden box, from which Thomas withdrew several precious vials of ink and fine quills. As they spoke of matters pertaining to their holy orders, I tried to focus upon my work. Yet I found myself stealing glances at this Brother Marcus, noting the way the light played upon his dark hair, the gentle manner in which he handled the sacred text, the musical quality of his laughter when Thomas shared some amusing tale. "Sister Evangeline," Thomas called to me, and I started as though awakened from a dream. "Wouldst thou show Brother Marcus our newest acquisition? Thy knowledge of their contents exceeds even mine own." Heat rose to my cheeks as I stood, smoothing my robes with trembling hands. "Certainly, Brother Thomas." Marcus followed me to the far corner of the scriptorium, where several new volumes lay carefully arranged upon a reading table. As I reached for the topmost manuscript, my sleeve caught upon the corner, and several loose pages scattered to the floor. "Oh!" I gasped, dropping to my knees to gather them before they could be damaged. Marcus knelt beside me, his hands working quickly to collect the wayward sheet. As he handed me the final page, our fingers touched for the briefest moment. The contact sent a shock through me more powerful than any winter. "Forgive my clumsiness," I murmured, unable to meet his eyes. "There is naught to forgive," he said gently. "Even angels sometimes stumble." The words were spoken so quietly that I wondered if I had imagined them. When I dared to look up, I found his gray eyes studying my face with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. "Sister Evangeline," Brother Thomas called from across the room, "Mother Superior seeks thy presence in the chapel." I rose quickly, grateful for the interruption, yet strangely disappointed. "I must take my leave. Brother Marcus, may God grant thee a safe journey home." He stood as well, inclining his head respectfully. "And may he watch over thee, sister." As I hurried through the corridors toward the chapel, my heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird. I had taken vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience. Yet in those few moments beside Brother Marcus, I had felt something stir within me that had nothing to do with divine love and everything to do with earthly desire. Mother Superior Marguerite was waiting for me before the altar, her stern countenance made more forbidding by the flickering candlelight. She was a woman of 60 years, who had served God since her youth and expected the same unwavering devotion from all under her care. "Sister Evangeline," she began without preamble, "I have received word that thy skills in the scriptorium have gained notice beyond our walls. The bishop himself has requested that thou assist with copying an important theological treatise. My heart leaped with joy. To be chosen for such an honor was beyond my wildest. I am deeply grateful for this opportunity. Mother Superior, the work will require thee to collaborate closely with the scribes from St. Benedict's Monastery. They shall visit our scriptorium daily for the next month to oversee the project. Her pale eyes fixed upon me with uncomfortable intent. I trust thou wilt conduct thyself with the utmost propriety, and remember thy vows at all times. Of course, Mother Superior, I replied, though even as I spoke the words, I could not banish the memory of Marcus's gentle touch. The next morning brought with it a transformation of our usually quiet scriptorium. 3 monks from St. Benedict's arrived shortly after prime, their arrival announced by the soft shuffle of sandaled feet upon stone and the rustle of parchment being arranged. Brother Marcus was among them, and I found myself stealing glances at him as we worked in companionable silence. The treatise we were copying was St. Jerome's commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, and the work required meticulous attention. Each page must be perfect, each letter formed with precision that would honor both God and the bishop who had commissioned. Sister Evangeline, Marcus said quietly, appearing at my side as I struggled with a particularly complex illumination. Might I offer assistance? I hesitated. The proper response would be to decline and seek help from Brother Thomas or one of the other nuns. Yet the golden scroll work I was attempting seemed beyond my current skill, and the deadline pressed upon us like a weight. I would be grateful for thy guidance. Brother, I whispered. He pulled a stool close to mine, closer than was strictly proper, though not so close as to invite comment from the others. His hand covered mine as he guided my movement, showing me how to create the delicate curves and flourishes that would frame the sacred text. Like so, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Let the pen flow like water, not fighting against its natural inclination. Under his tutelage, the illumination began to take shape. Golden vines seemed to grow beneath my fingers, intertwining with scarlet roses and deep blue forget-me-nots. It was beautiful work, perhaps the finest I had ever produced. Thou hast a gift, Marcus said, when the page was. God hath blessed thy hands with uncommon skill. 'Twas thy instruction that made it possible, I replied, still studying the completed illumination with wonder. Nay, he said softly, the talent was always within thee. I merely helped thee see it. As the days passed, our collaboration deepened. Marcus would appear at my side whenever I faced a challenge, his patient instruction transforming my adequate work into something approaching artistry. We spoke little beyond what was necessary for our task, but an understanding grew between us that needed no words. I began to live for those moments when he would lean close to examine my work, when his hand would steady mine as I navigated a particularly difficult passage, when his quiet praise would send warmth flooding through my veins. It was dangerous, this growing attachment, yet I could no more stop it than I could halt the rising of the sun. On the 10th day of our collaboration, as evening prayers concluded and the other inhabitants of the abbey retired to their cells, I remained in the scriptorium to finish a page that had been troubling me. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft scratching of my pen upon parchment and the distant hooting of an owl in the abbey's. I was so absorbed in my work that I did not hear footsteps approaching until a familiar voice spoke from the shadows. Thou shouldst not work so late, sis. Even the most devout need rest. I looked up to find Marcus standing in the doorway, a single candle in his hand. The warm light danced across his, making him appear almost otherworldly in the darkness. I could not leave this passage unfinished, I said, indicating the page before. Tomorrow we begin the final chapter, and I would not have my inferior work mar such sacred text. He approached slowly, setting his candle upon the table beside mine. May I see what troubles thee so? I shifted slightly to allow him to examine my work, acutely aware of his nearness. He leaned over my shoulder, studying the page with careful attention. I see no fault in this work, he said finally. Indeed, it is quite beautiful. The proportions seem wrong, I insist. The capital letter overwhelms the surrounding text, and the border decoration appears heavy-handed. Nay, look again. His finger traced the lines I had drawn, not quite touching the parchment. See how the bold strokes draw the eye inward, creating a natural focus upon the sacred words. And the border it does not overwhelm, but rather embrace it, like protective arms around something precious. As he spoke, his hand came to rest upon the table beside mine. I stared down at his fingers, long, elegant, stained with ink from his own day's labor. Slowly, as though drawn by some invisible force, my hand moved until it nearly touched his. "Sister Evangeline," he said. And there was something different, a roughness that had not been there before. I looked up to find his gray eyes fixed upon my face, with an intensity that made my breath catch. We were alone in the scriptorium, alone in a way that was completely improper, and yet felt as natural as drawing breath. "We should not," I began, but he silenced me with a gentle shake of his head. "Do not pray today, just feel," he whispered, his words barely audible in the profound silence. His hand moved to cover mine completely, and I did not pull away. Instead, I marveled at the warmth of his skin, the gentle strength of his fingers as they intertwined with mine. "This is forbidden," I whispered, even as my heart sang with joy at his. "Many things are forbidden that are not sin," he replied. "Is it sin to recognize beauty, to feel gratitude for God's creation, to find solace in another soul that understands thy deepest thoughts?" His words were dangerous, I knew, yet they resonated within me like the tolling of a great bell. Was it truly wrong to feel this connection, this sense of completion when he was near? "What if we are discovered?" I asked, though I made no move to withdraw my hand from him. "Then we shall face whatever consequences God sees fit to send us," he said simply. "But in this moment, in this place, we are merely two souls recognizing the divine spark in one another." He lifted our joined hands and pressed them to his heart. Through the rough fabric of his robes, I could feel the strong, steady rhythm of his pulse. "I have tried to pray away these feelings," he confessed. "I have spent hours upon my knees, begging God to release me from this enchantment. But each morning, I awaken with thy face in my thought. Each evening, I fall asleep wondering if thou dost think of me as I think." Tears sprang to my eyes, for his words echoed my own struggles. "Exactly. And I have wondered if I am losing my mind," I whispered. "For how can I serve God with a divided heart?" "Perhaps," he said gently, "our hearts are not divided, but rather expanded. Perhaps God brought us together not to test our faith, but to deepen it through understanding what it truly means to love." His words were heretical, I knew, yet they felt more true than anything I had heard spoken from. Was it possible that this connection between us was not temptation but blessing? A sound from the corridor beyond made us both free. Footsteps echoed against stone, growing closer with each passing moment. We sprang apart like guilty children, Marcus moving quickly to the far side of the table, while I bent over my work with exaggerated concentration. Brother Thomas appeared in the doorway, his weathered face creased with concern. "Sister Evangeline, Brother Marcus, what keeps ye both awake at such an hour?" "Forgive me, Brother Thomas," I said, praying that my voice sounded normal. I was struggling with this illumination and lost track of time, and I discovered her when I came to retrieve a text I had forgotten. Marcus added smoothly, "I offered what assistance I could before we both retire." Brother Thomas approached to examine my work, nodding approvingly at what he saw. "Fine work indeed, though not worth endangering thy health through lack of Come, both of the let us seek our beds before matins arrives all too." We extinguished our candles and filed out of the scriptorium together, but not before Marcus caught my eye and smiled a small, secret smile that made my heart race anew. That night, as I lay upon my narrow cot, listening to the gentle breathing of my fellow novices, I could not banish the memory of his touch or his words. "Do not pray today, just feel." The phrase repeated itself in my mind like a sacred chant, though I knew it was anything but sacred. What was happening to me? I had come to this place seeking purpose, a way to serve God that would give meaning to my otherwise unremarkable existence. Instead, I had found something I could not name, something that filled me with both joy and terror in equal measure. The next morning brought with it a transformation in our working relationship. Though we were careful to maintain proper distance when others were present, Marcus found ways to communicate with me that needed no words. A meaningful glance when we encountered a particularly beautiful passage, a smile when I successfully completed a difficult illumination, small gestures that spoke of the connection we had acknowledged the night before. Brother Paul, the eldest of the visiting monks, seemed to notice nothing. He was a scholarly man of perhaps 50 years, completely absorbed in the theological implications of the text we were copying. Brother David, younger and more observant, occasionally glanced in our direction with what I feared was growing suspicion. Sister Catherine, who assisted in the scriptorium when her other duties permitted, had certainly taken notice. She was a woman of my own age who had entered the abbey as a child and knew no life beyond these walls. Her devotion was absolute and unwavering, making her particularly sensitive to any deviation from proper behavior. "Sister Evangeline," she said to me as we walked to none that afternoon, "I have observed that Brother Marcus speaks to thee more than is seemly for one in thy position." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my voice to remain calm. "He provides instruction in certain techniques of illumination that are unfamiliar to me. Sister Catherine, surely there is no impropriety in learning skills that better serve God's glory." She was quiet for a long moment, her pale eyes studying my face with uncomfortable intensity. "I pray thou art right, yet I cannot help but notice that thou seem different since these monks arrived. More distracted during prayer, less focused upon thy duties. Was my transformation so obvious? I had thought myself careful, yet if Catherine had noticed, perhaps others had as well. "I am merely eager to do justice to this important commission," I said. "The bishop's trust weighs heavily upon me." "See that it is only the bishop's trust that weighs upon thee," Catherine replied meaningfully, before hurrying ahead to take her place in the chapel. Her words haunted me throughout the afternoon's prayers and into the evening hour. Was I truly so transparent? Had my feelings for Marcus become visible to anyone who cared to look? That night, I waited until the abbey had settled into sleep before making my way to the scriptorium. I told myself I was simply eager to complete the page I had been working on. But in truth, I hoped Marcus might appear, as he had the night before. He did not disappoint me. I had been working perhaps an hour when I heard his soft footfalls in the corridor beyond. This time, when he appeared in the doorway, he carried no candle. Instead, he relied upon the moonlight streaming through the tall windows to guide his steps. "I hoped I might find thee here," he said softly, approaching my table with careful quiet. "And I hoped thou might come," I admitted, abandoning any pretense of coincidence. He sat beside me, closer than he had dared with others present. In the silvery moonlight, his face appeared ethereal, almost angelic. "I have been thinking about what thou said last night," I began hesitant, "about God bringing us together to deepen our faith through understanding love. And what conclusions have thy contemplations brought thee?" I set down my pen and turned to face him fully. "I think perhaps thou art right. I have loved God all my life, or thought I did, but it was an abstract love, a love of duty and obligation. Since meeting thee, I have begun to understand what it means to love someone so completely that their joy becomes thy joy, their pain, thy pain. If this is what God feels for his children, then we begin to comprehend the true magnitude of divine love." Marcus finished softly. "Yes, I believe this is." He reached for my hand, and this time, I did not hesitate to give it to him. Our fingers intertwined as naturally as if we had been created for this very purpose. Yet even if our connection serves to deepen our faith, the world will not see it thus, I said. To others, we are simply a monk and a nun who have forgotten their vows. Perhaps, he agreed, but what others see and what God knows are often quite different. We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, hands joined, hearts beating in rhythm. The peace I felt in that moment was deeper than any I had experienced in 3 years of prayer and meditation. "Tell me of thy life before thou camest to St. Benedict's," I said eventually. A shadow crossed his features. "My tale is not uncommon. I was the second son of a minor lord, destined for the church since birth. When my older brother died in a hunting accident, my father wished me to leave holy orders and assume responsibility for our lands. But by then, I had found genuine calling in scholarly pursuits and convinced him to let me remain. And hast thou ever regretted that choice?" "Not until now," he said quietly. "Not until I met a certain sister's presence makes me wonder what other paths my life might have taken." His words sent both warmth and sadness through me. What good does it serve to wonder such things? Our paths are set, our vows spoken. Are they truly? He turned to face me fully, his gray eyes intense in the moonlight. "Vows can be dissolved, Evangeline. Life can be chosen over duty. The use of my given name sent a shock through. No one had called me simply Evangeline since my parents died 7 years ago. Thou speak of heresy, I whispered. I speak of possibility. His free hand reached up to touch my cheek with infinite gentleness. There is a world beyond these walls, beyond vows we took as children who knew nothing of our own hearts. And what would we be in that world? I asked, though part of me thrilled at the very thought. To people with no family, no resources, no place in society, we would be ourselves, he said simply. Two souls who found each other against all odds and refused to let propriety destroy what God had created. His words painted a picture so appealing that it took all my strength to resist. To live freely, to love without shame, to wake each morning beside this man who understood my heart as no other ever could. It is a beautiful dream, I said finally, but dreams and reality are often quite different things. Sometimes, he agreed, but sometimes, if we have courage enough to reach for them, dreams become reality. A sound from the corridor made us spring apart once again, but this time, no one appeared. Perhaps a mouse in the walls, or the settling of ancient stone. Yet the interruption served to remind us both of the dangerous game we were playing. We should return to our cells, I said reluctantly. Yes, he agreed, though he made no move to. Instead, he lifted my hand to his lips and pressed the gentlest of kisses to my palm. Until tomorrow, dearest Evangeline. The endearment and the kiss combined to render me nearly speechless. I managed only a whispered until tomorrow before he rose and disappeared into the shadows like a phantom born of moonlight and desire. The following days passed in a blur of stolen glances, whispered conversation, and in growing sense of recklessness that both thrilled and terrified me. Marcus and I found increasingly creative ways to spend time alone together, examining manuscripts in distant alcoves, discussing theological points in empty corridors, sharing meals in corners of the refectory where shadows provided some privacy. With each passing day, our emotional intimacy, we shared stories of our childhood, our hopes and fears, our thoughts on everything from scripture to the changing sea. I came to know him as I had never known another human being, and felt myself known by him in return. Yet with this growing closeness came increased danger. Brother David had begun watching us with obvious suspicion, and Sister Catherine made pointed comments about the importance of maintaining proper conduct. Even Brother Thomas, usually so absorbed in his scholarly pursuits, occasionally glanced in our direction with what might have been concern. It was Sister Joan, the Abbey's eldest resident, and a woman renowned for her wisdom and discretion, who finally confronted me directly. I was working alone in the scriptorium late one afternoon, putting finishing touches on what would be our final page of St. Jerome's commentary, when she appeared beside me like a gray wraith. Sister Evangeline, she said in her soft, raspy voice, might I have a word with thee? My hand trembled, causing a small blot of ink to mar the page I had been perfecting. Of course, Sister Joan. She settled onto the stool beside me, her rheumatic joints creaking like old wood. For several moments she simply studied my face, with eyes that had seen 8 decades of human folly and grace. Child, she said finally, I have lived long enough to recognize the signs of a heart in turmoil. What troubles thee so? I could have dissembled, could have claimed fatigue from our intensive work, or worry about completing the commission to the bishop's satisfaction. Instead, something in her gentle manner compelled honesty. I fear I have allowed my heart to stray from its proper focus, I admit. She nodded slowly, the young monk from St. Benedict's. It was not a question. Apparently, my feelings were even more transparent than I had feared. We have done nothing improper, I said quickly. We have shared no more than conversation and friendship. Peace, child. I do not come as judge, but as one who has walked similar path. Her weathered hand covered mine with surprising warmth. Dost thou think thou art the first to find thy vows tested by the presence of a kindred soul? I stared at her in amazement. Thou hast experienced such feelings. A sad smile crossed her. Long ago, when I was no older than thee, there came to this abbey a young Father Michael. His name was sent to conduct a spiritual retreat for our community. Like thee and thy monk, we found ourselves drawn together by shared interests and compatible minds. What happened? I whispered. We talked, we laughed, we shared thoughts and dreams that we had never voiced to another soul. And gradually, inevitably, we fell deeply in love. Her eyes grew distant with memory. For 3 months, we met in secret, convincing ourselves that our connection was purely spiritual, that our love elevated rather than diminished our devotion to God. And then we were discovered. Her voice grew heavy with old pain. Father Michael was sent far away, to a monastery in the northern mountains, where communication with the outside world was strictly forbidden. I was placed under severe penance, months of silence, additional prayers, manual labor from dawn until dusk. My heart ached for the young woman she had been. Did thou ever see him again? Never. I learned years later that he had died of fever within 2 years of his banishment. Tears gathered in her ancient eyes. He died believing himself damned, convinced that our love had been sinful rather than sacred. But thou dost not believe it was sinful. She was quiet for so long that I thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I believe God creates love in all its forms, for reasons beyond our understanding. I believe that what Michael and I shared was beautiful and pure, even if it could not exist within the confines of our chosen life. She turned to look at me directly. But I also believe that some kinds of beauty are too precious to risk destroying through reckless action. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Thou think I should end this friendship with Brother Marcus. I think thou shouldst consider carefully what thou art willing to sacrifice for. She replied, and what thou might be asking him to sacrifice as well. That evening, as I knelt in my cell for private prayer, Sister Joan's words echoed in my thoughts. Was I being selfish in encouraging Marcus's attention? Was I risking not only my own future, but his as well? The commission was nearly complete. In perhaps 3 more days, the monks from St. Benedict's would return to their own abbey, and this chapter of my life would close forever. Perhaps that was for the best. Perhaps the wise thing would be to treasure these few precious as a gift from God and then return to the life I had chosen. Yet even as I reached this rational conclusion, my treacherous heart rebelled against it. How could I simply let Marcus walk away? How could I return to the colorless existence I had known before, now that I understood what it meant to feel truly alive? The next morning brought unexpected news that would force the issue beyond my control. Mother Superior summoned all the sisters to the chapter house immediately after prime, her stern countenance more forbidding than usual. Sisters, she began without preamble, it has come to my attention that certain members of our community have been engaging in inappropriate conduct with our visitors from St. Benedict's Monastery. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Beside me, I heard Sister Catherine's sharp intake of breath, and knew with horrible certainty that she had reported her suspicions to the Mother Superior. While I do not wish to cast aspersions upon any individual without clear evidence, Mother Superior continued, her pale eyes scanning our assembled faces. I feel compelled to remind you all of the sacred vows you have taken. You have promised God to live lives of chastity, poverty, and obedience. Any violation of these vows brings shame not only upon yourself, but upon this entire community. Her gaze lingered upon me with uncomfortable intensity, and I felt heat rising in my cheeks despite my efforts to remain composed. Therefore, she continued, I have decided that all collaboration between our scriptorium and the visiting monks will cease immediately. They will complete their work without further assistance from any member of our community. My heart plummeted. 3 more days, we had needed only 3 more days to finish the commission. Now I would not even have the opportunity to say farewell to Marcus properly. Sister Evangeline, Mother Superior called, and I rose on trembling legs. You will confine yourself to yourself for the remainder of the day, reflecting upon your conduct and examining your conscience. Tomorrow, you will make full confession to Father Benedict, withholding nothing that might stain your soul. Yes, Mother Superior, I whispered, though the words felt like ashes in my mouth. As I made my way back to my cell through corridors that suddenly felt like prison walls, I passed the scriptorium. Through the open doorway, I glimpsed Marcus bending over our unfinished work. His dark head bent in concentration. He must have heard my footsteps, for he looked up and caught sight of me. The pain and confusion in his gray eyes nearly brought me to my knees. I wanted to run to him, to explain what had happened, to find some way to preserve what we had built between us. Instead, I lowered my gaze and continued walking, leaving him to draw his own conclusions about my sudden absence. The hours of my confinement passed with agonizing slowness. I tried to pray, to read scripture, to occupy my mind with holy thoughts. Instead, I found myself reliving every moment Marcus and I had shared, every conversation, every touch, every look that had passed between us. How had I allowed myself to believe, even briefly, that such happiness could last? I had been living in a dream, and now harsh reality had awakened me to the consequences of my fool. As evening approached, I heard voices in the corridor outside my cell. One of them was Marcus's, speaking urgently, but too quietly for me to make out words. The other voice belonged to Brother Thomas, his tone placating but firm. After several minutes, the voices faded, and I heard the sound of footsteps retreating toward the Abbey's main entrance. Were they leaving already? Had Mother Superior's edict ended not only our collaboration but their entire visit? I pressed my face to the small window of my cell, straining to see the courtyard below. In the gathering dusk, I could make out 3 figures in brown robes walking toward the gates. Even at this distance, even in the poor light, I recognized Marcus's tall form and the particular way he carried his shoulder. He paused at the Abbey gates and looked back toward the building where I was imprisoned. Though he could not possibly see me in my darkened cell, I felt his gaze like a physical touch. Then Brother Thomas placed a hand upon his arm, urging him forward, and they disappeared into the twilight. I sank to my knees beside the narrow window, tears streaming down my face in a torrent of grief and loss. He was gone, and I had not even been allowed to say farewell. Worse, he had no way of knowing that my feelings for him remained unchanged, that my absence from the scriptorium had been forced rather than chosen. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I lay upon my narrow cot, staring up at the stone ceiling, and wondering if Marcus was experiencing similar torment in his cell at St. Benedict. Did he believe I had abandoned him? Did he think our connection had meant less to me than it truly? The next morning brought Father Benedict, the Abbey's confessor, to hear my supposed sin. He was an elderly priest of perhaps 70 years, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that had always put me at ease. Today, however, I approached the confessional with dread, heavy as lead in my stomach. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," I began, in the traditional manner. "Tell me, child, what troubles thy conscience?" I drew a deep breath and began the most difficult confession of my life. I have allowed my heart to stray from its proper devotion to God. I have formed an attachment to one whose station and mine makes such feelings inappropriate. Father Benedict's voice remained neutral, giving no indication of judgment or condemnation. And what form did this attachment take? We spoke together often during our work in the scriptorium. We shared thoughts and feelings that perhaps should have remained private. I hesitate, remembering Marcus's gentle touches, his kiss upon my palm. We touched hands on occasion, though never in any manner that violated the bounds of propriety. And in thy heart, child, what feelings did these interactions engender? The question cut straight to the heart of my struggle. I came to care for him Father, more deeply than is seemly for one in my position. I found myself thinking of him constantly, living for the moments when we could speak together, imagining, I could not finish the sentence, imagining a different life. Father Benedict said gently, a life where such feelings could be freely expressed and returned. Yes, Father. The admission felt like a physical weight lifted from my shoulders. And dost thou believe these feelings to be sinful? The question surprised me. I had expected immediate condemnation, demands for penance, lectures on the importance of my vows. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in my perspective. I am not certain, Father. They felt pure and beautiful when they were happening. Yet I know they violated my vows of chastity and obedience. Tell me, child, when thou wast in this young man's presence, did thy love of God diminish or increase? I considered the question carefully. Increase, I think. Being with him made me feel closer to understanding what it means to love completely, without reservation, and that seemed to illuminate divine love in ways I had never comprehended before. Father Benedict was quiet for several long moments. Child, I have been hearing confessions for more than 40 years, and in that time I have learned to distinguish between sins of the flesh and sins of the heart. What thou hast described sounds very much like the latter, a deep spiritual connection that happened to exist between two people who have committed themselves to religious life. His words offered comfort I had not dared hope for. Then thou dost not believe I have committed grave sin. I believe thou hast discovered something precious and beautiful that exists outside the bounds of thy chosen vocation. He replied, whether that makes it sinful is a question I cannot answer with certainty. But I can tell thee, this love itself is never sinful, only what we choose to do with it. What should I do, Father? How can I continue serving God when my heart remains divided? Perhaps thy heart is not divided but enlarged, he suggested, echoing words Marcus himself had spoken. Perhaps this experience has taught thee something valuable about the nature of love that will serve thee well in future service to God. But I cannot stop thinking of him, I confessed miserably. Even now, knowing he is gone, I find myself hoping for some miracle that might bring him back to me. That hope will fade with time, child, as all such hopes must. But the love itself, the capacity for deep connection that thou hast discovered within thyself, that will remain. And perhaps God intended for thee to find it precisely so that thou might better understand his own love for his children. Father, Benedict assigned me only light penance additional prayers and fasting for 1 week, dismissed me with words of gentle encouragement. As I left the confessional, I felt simultaneously relieved and empty. The burden of guilt had been lifted, yet the ache of loss remained as sharp as ever. The days that followed passed in a gray haze of routine duties and forced normalcy. I returned to my work in the scriptorium, now copying simpler texts under Brother Thomas's patient supervision. The elaborate theological treatise that Marcus and I had labored over together remained unfinished, a testament to our interrupted collaboration. Sister Catherine, perhaps feeling guilty for her role in my punishment, made several attempts at friendly conversation. I responded politely, but without warmth. Unable to fully forgive her interference, even though I understood she had acted from genuine concern for my spiritual welfare. It was Sister Joan who provided the greatest comfort during those difficult. She would appear beside me during times when my melancholy seemed most pronounced, offering quiet companionship and wordless understanding. Sometimes she shared stories of her own youth, painting pictures of a world beyond abbey walls that seemed as distant as the stars. Pain fades, child, she told me one evening as we walked together in the abbey's herb garden. Not quickly, and never completely, but it does soften with time. What remains is the gift of having loved deeply, even briefly. How dost thou bear it? I asked. Knowing that Father Michael died, believing himself damned, her steps slowed, and for a moment I thought I had caused her pain with my thoughtless question. Then she smiled, an expression of such serene beauty that it transformed her wrinkled features. By choosing to believe that love is never wasted, she said simply, by trusting that somehow, somewhere, he knows the truth of what we shared, and by living each day in a manner that honors the beauty we found together. Her words planted a seed of hope in my wounded heart. Perhaps there was a way to transform this grief into something meaningful, something that could serve God's purposes even as it preserved the memory of what Marcus and I had shared. As autumn deepened into winter, I threw myself into my duties with renewed dedication. I volunteered for additional hours in the scriptorium, took on extra responsibilities in the abbey's daily operations, and spent long hours in prayer and meditation. If I could not have the love I desired, I would at least ensure that my remaining years served some useful purpose. It was during one of these extended prayer sessions, as I knelt before the altar in the empty chapel, during the quiet hours after that I heard footsteps approaching. I assumed it was one of the other sisters coming to make private devotion, but when I glanced up, I saw Brother Thomas entering through the side door that connected to the scriptorium. "Forgive the intrusion, Sister Evangeline," he said quietly, "but I bring news that might be of interest to—" My heart leaped with sudden, irrational news, Brother Thomas. He approached slowly, settling onto the bench beside where I knelt. In his hands, he carried a small package wrapped in simple brown cloth. "A messenger came today from St. Benedict's monastery," he began carefully. "He brought this, along with word that the theological treatise thou and Brother Marcus labored upon has been complete." With trembling fingers, I accepted the package. It was heavier than I had expected, and when I unwrapped it, I discovered a beautifully bound volume treatise, completed and illuminated with gold leaf that caught the candlelight like tiny "How?" I whispered, hardly daring to believe what I held in my hand. Brother Marcus worked day and night to finish it, Thomas explained gently. He completed not only the remaining text, but also created illuminations to match thy earlier work. The bishop was so impressed that he has requested additional commissions from both our community. I opened the volume carefully, marveling at the exquisite craftsmanship. Marcus had indeed matched my style perfect, creating a seamless continuation of our collaborative effort. More than that, he had somehow improved upon my work, adding subtle details and refinements that elevated the entire piece. There is more, Brother Thomas said softly, and I looked up to find him watching my face with gentle concern. The messenger brought word that Brother Marcus has requested permission to join a missionary expedition to the Holy Land. It seems he feels called to serve God in distant places. The book nearly slipped from my nerveless fingers. The Holy Land, a journey from which many never return, even those who survived the dangers of travel and conflict. When I managed to ask, they depart with the spring sailing season, Thomas replied, perhaps 3 months hence. 3 months, such a short time, yet it might as well have been an eternity. Even if I could find some way to contact him, what purpose would it serve? We could not change the fundamental impossibility of our situation. Yet, as I sat there holding the finished treatise, the physical embodiment of our partnership, I felt something shift within my heart. Marcus was not abandoning me by choosing this path. He was doing what I had been trying to do, transforming impossible love into service to God. Brother Thomas, I said slowly, would it be possible for me to send a message to St. Benedict's Monastery? A letter of congratulations on the completion of our joint project? His weathered face creased with understanding. I believe that would be entirely appropriate. Sister Evangeline, such correspondence would fall well within the bounds of scholarly cooperation between our community. That night, I sat at my small writing desk, composing the most important letter of my life. I wrote and rewrote each line, struggling to find words that would convey my true feelings while remaining appropriate for any eyes that might read. Finally, as dawn light began to filter through my cell window, I completed a version that satisfied both propriety and my heart's need for expression. Dear Brother Marcus, Brother Thomas has shown me the completed treatise, and I am filled with admiration for thy skill and dedication in bringing our joint project to such beautiful completion. Thy illuminations surpass even my fondest hope, and I feel deeply honored to have contributed in small part to such a magnificent work. I have heard of thy plans to journey to the Holy Land in service to our Lord. Such a calling requires great courage and faith, qualities I have always admired in thee. Know that thy mission will be remembered in my daily prayers, and that I trust God will watch over thee in all thy endeavors. The weeks we spent collaborating on this project remain among the most rewarding of my religious life. Thy patience, wisdom, and gentle guidance helped me discover capabilities I never knew I possessed. For this gift of growth and understanding, I shall always be grateful. May God bless thy journey and bring thee safely to whatever destination He has chosen for thy service. Though our paths now diverge, the memory of our shared work will remain a source of inspiration and strength. In Christ's love and service, Sister Evangeline *, I sealed the letter carefully and entrusted it to Brother Thomas, who promised to ensure its swift delivery. Then I returned to my cell to await whatever response might come, if any came at all. The reply arrived just as winter's grip began to loosen into the first tentative promises of spring. Brother Thomas found me in the scriptorium and handed me a letter bearing the seal of St. Benedict's Monastery. His eyes kind with understanding. My hands shook as I broke the seal and unfolded the parchment, revealing Marcus's familiar handwriting. Dearest Sister Evangeline, thy letter brought joy to my heart, such as I have not felt since leaving thy abbey. To know that thou art well and continuing thy important work fills me with gratitude beyond expression. I am indeed called to serve in the Holy Land. Though I confess, the calling feels less like divine inspiration than desperate necessity. Since our parting, I have found it impossible to settle into the peaceful routine of monastic life. My thoughts turn constantly to thee, and I fear my distraction disturbs both God and my brothers in this community. Perhaps in the distant places where our Lord walked, I will find the peace that eludes me here. Or perhaps I will simply find new ways to serve him while carrying thy memory as a sacred treasure in my heart. Thou wrote of feeling honored to contribute to our joint project, but know that the honor was entirely mine. Working beside the revealed heights of artistic achievement I never could have reached alone. More than that, knowing thee deepened my understanding of what it means to love purely and completely. I have requested that a copy of our completed treatise be sent to thy abbey's library, along with instructions that it be dedicated to the greater glory of God and the memory of all who labor in love and service. When thou dost see it there, remember that every illumination, every carefully formed letter, was created with thoughts of thee. If God wills that we meet again in this world, I trust he will make a way. If not, then I rest in the hope that the love we discovered together was indeed his gift to us both, a glimpse of the perfect love that awaits all his faithful servants. Until that blessed reunion, I remain thy devoted servant in Christ. Brother Marcus *. I read the letter 3 times before my tears made the ink to blurred to continue. He understood. He knew that our separation had been forced rather than chosen, and he carried no resentment for my apparent abandonment. More than that, he treasured our connection as deeply as I did. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came news from the outside world that reached even our cloistered community. The expedition to the Holy Land had been delayed due to political complications in the eastern Mediterranean. Then it was postponed indefinitely when several of its planned participants fell ill with fever. I tried not to read too much significance into these developments, yet I could not help wondering if perhaps God was intervening to prevent Marcus's departure. Surely such thoughts were foolish, yet they persisted despite my efforts to dismiss them. It was on the feast day of St. Catherine date that held particular meaning for me, given my complicated relationship with my fellow sister of that name. That Brother Thomas approached me with news that would change everything. Sister Evangeline, he said, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of barely contained excitement. I have received a most unusual request from the bishop himself. I looked up from the manuscript I was copying, noting the strange quality of his expression. What manner of request, Brother Thomas? He wishes to establish a new scriptorium, Thomas settling onto a stool beside my work table. A collaborative endeavor between several religious communities, dedicated to preserving and copying the most important theological and philosophical texts of our time. That sounds like a worthy project, I said carefully, uncertain why he seemed so animated about the prospect. The scriptorium would be housed in a new building constructed specifically for this purpose. Located near the cathedral in the provincial capital, it would be staffed by the most skilled scribes and illuminators from monasteries and convents throughout the region, working together without the usual restrictions that separate male and female religious communities. My heart began to race as the implications of his words. And the bishop wishes our abbey to contribute to this endeavor. He wishes thee specifically to join this new community, Thomas said gently. Thy work on the theological treatise brought thee to his attention, and he believes thy skills would be invaluable to this project. I stared at him in amazement. But surely Mother Superior would never consent to such an arrangement. On the contrary, she has already given her approval. Such an assignment would bring great honor to our community and demonstrate the quality of education and training provided. Thomas leaned forward, his eyes twinkling with barely suppressed mirth. There is one more detail thou should know about this appointment. Yes, Brother Marcus of St. Benedict's has also been invited to join this new scriptorium. It seems his work on the same treatise impressed the bishop equally. The manuscript slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers. Marcus will be there. According to the bishop's letter, he has already accepted the appointment and waits only for confirmation of his collaborators before beginning work. Thomas smiled broadly. It appears that God has found a way to reunite two souls whose work serves his greater glory. That evening, I knelt in the chapel for longer than I had in months, not praying for release from my feelings or begging forgiveness for impossible dreams, but simply offering thanks for a miracle I had never dared to hope. The new scriptorium would not permit marriage or traditional romantic relationship, but it would allow Marcus and me to work together to continue the collaboration that had brought such meaning to both our lives. We would still be bound by vows of chastity, but we would be free to express our love through shared devotion to the written word and service to God. It was not the life I might once have imagined, but it was far more than I had believed possible during those dark weeks after his departure. 2 months later, I stood in the courtyard of St. Margaret's Abbey, my few possessions packed in a simple traveling bag, preparing to begin the next chapter of my life. Sister Joan embraced me with tears in her ancient, whispering words of blessing and encouragement. "Remember, child," she said softly, "love takes many forms, but it is always a gift from God. Use this gift wisely, and let it guide thee to service greater than thou couldst achieve alone." Even Sister Catherine approached to bid me farewell, her usual stern expression softened with what might have been genuine affection. "May God watch over thee, Sister Evangeline, and may thy work bring glory to Him." As our small traveling party passed through the Abbey gates, I looked back once at the place that had been my home for nearly 4 years. It had given me shelter, education, and purpose during a crucial period of my life. Now, it was releasing me to find a different kind of purpose, one that honored both my gifts and my heart. The journey to the provincial capital took 3 days, and with each mile that passed, my anticipation grew stronger. What would it be like to see Marcus again after so many months of separation? Would our connection survive the transition from forbidden attraction to sanctioned collaboration? The new scriptorium exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. The bishop had spared no expense in creating a facility worthy of the important work that would be conducted there. Tall windows filled the space with natural light, while carefully designed ventilations ensured that precious manuscripts would be protected from dampness and extremes of temperature. I was examining the beautiful arrangement of writing tables and storage alcoves when I heard a familiar voice behind. "Sister Evangeline?" I turned slowly, my heart hammering with sudden nervousness. Marcus stood in the doorway, dressed in the same simple brown robes I remembered, but somehow transformed by the months that had passed. He seemed taller, more mature, though his gray eyes held the same warmth that had first captured my heart. "Brother Marcus," I replied, marveling at how natural his name felt upon my lips after so long. He approached carefully, stopping at a respectful distance. "Thou art well. The journey was not too arduous." "I am well, thank thee. And thou? I heard thy planned expedition was delayed." A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "It seems God had other plans for my service, plans that I find far more appealing than traveling to distant lands." We stood there for several moments, simply looking at each, reacquainting ourselves with features that had lived only in memory for so long. The attraction was still there, perhaps stronger than ever, but it was tempered now by a deeper understanding of what was possible and what was not. "I have thought often of our last conversation," I said carefully, "about dreams becoming reality through courage. And I have learned that reality sometimes surpasses even our most cherished." He replied, "We may not have the life we once imagined, but we have something perhaps even more precious, the opportunity to love through service, to express our connection through work that serves God's purpose." Over the weeks that followed, we settled into a routine that brought me more contentment than I had ever thought possible. We worked side by side each day, our collaboration even more seamless than it had been at St. Margaret's Abbey. The other members of our communities, 6 monks and 4 nuns, drawn from various religious houses, quickly came to regard us as a team, often assigning us joint projects that required our combined skills. In the evenings, when the formal work was done, Marcus and I would often remain in the scriptorium, discussing theological points or sharing thoughts on the texts we were copying. These conversations were the highlight of my days, moments when our minds met in perfect harmony and our souls touched across the careful distance we maintained. We were careful never to be completely alone together, never to touch except in the most unavoidable circumstances, never to speak words that might be construed as romantic rather than spiritual. Yet, within these constraints, we found ways to express our love that were perhaps more beautiful than any traditional courtship could have been. It was in the margin notes we left for each other, in shared manuscripts. It was in the way Marcus would create illuminations that incorporated symbols meaningful only to me. It was in the gentle way he would steady my hand when fatigue threatened the quality of my work, and the proud smile he wore when examining my completed pages. One evening, as we worked together on a particularly complex passage from St. Augustine, Marcus spoke words that seemed to capture the essence of our unique relationship. Dost thou remember what I said to thee that first night we met alone? He asked softly. Do not pray today, just feel. I quoted the phrase as clear in my memory as if he had spoken it moments before. I have come to understand that feeling and praying need not be separate things, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Every moment I spend in thy presence is both prayer and feeling combined. Every word we share in service to God's glory is an expression of the love that lives between. His words moved me, for they articulated something I had been struggling to express for months. We have found a way to love that honors both heart and soul, I replied. Perhaps this was God's plan all along, not to deny our connection, but to transform it into something that serves His purposes. I believe so, Marcus agreed, and I believe that this love, purified through service and dedication, will endure far longer than any earthly romance could have done. Years passed in this manner, seasons flowing into one another like illuminated pages in the book of our shared life. Our reputation grew throughout the region and beyond, as the manuscripts we produced gained recognition for their exceptional beauty and accuracy. Bishops and abbots from distant places began requesting our services, and our little community expanded to accommodate the increasing demand. Marcus and I aged together, our hair growing gray, our faces gaining the lines that come with decades of close work and deep contemplation. Yet our connection remained as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having been tested by time and proven genuine. On quiet evenings, when the others had retired and we sat alone in the scriptoriums surrounded by the fruits of our labor, I sometimes marveled at the strange path that had brought us to this place. We had begun as two young religious who broke their vows by falling in love. We had been separated by suspicious superiors who feared scandal. Yet through God's mysterious providence, we had been reunited in a way that transformed our forbidden attraction into sanctified service. We never married, never shared a marriage bed, never spoke aloud the words of love that filled our hearts. Yet I knew with absolute certainty that Marcus loved me as completely as any husband had ever loved a wife, and that my love for him was equally deep and true. It was a different kind of love story than the troubadours sang about or the courtly romances celebrated. It was love refined by discipline, strengthened by sacrifice, and made eternal through dedication to something greater than ourselves. On the day I write these words, I am no longer young. My hair is white as winter's, my hands sometimes tremble with age, and my eyes require stronger magnification to read the manuscripts I still copy with careful devotion. Marcus, too, shows the marks of our many years together, though his smile remains as warm and his mind as sharp as ever. Tomorrow, we will begin work on a new project, complete illuminated Bible commissioned by the cathedral. It will likely take several years to complete, and we both understand it may be our final major collaboration. Yet I face this prospect not with sadness, but with gratitude for the extraordinary life God has granted us. Sometimes, young scribes visit our scriptorium, eager to learn from our techniques and benefit from our experience. They see an elderly monk and nun who work together with remarkable harmony, and they assume we are simply longtime colleagues who have developed an efficient partnership. They cannot see the deeper truth that we are lovers whose passion has been transformed into something far more enduring than physical desire, partners whose souls have been joined through decades of shared purpose, companions who have found a way to honor both human love and divine calling within the confines of religious life. If this tale hath touched thy heart, I pray thou wilt remember that love takes many forms, and that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are those that transform earthly passion into eternal devotion. May God grant thee the wisdom to recognize love in all its manifestations, and the courage to nurture it in whatever form best serves His greater glory. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, I commend this story to thy keep, trusting that it may inspire thee to seek love that endures beyond the boundaries of this mortal life.